Okay, welcome back. If you're just joining us later on when you're watching the recording, my name's Scott Alexander. I'm from the MII Council, and I'm chairing today's discussion on the MII TED Talk Club. We have a panel. Just let me get their bios up here. We have Anna Doyle. Anna Doyle is the International Network Coordinator of the MII, 17 years a mediator, and if you stay on much longer, it'll be 18 years a mediator, and an international public servant for 5 decades, working mainly in the areas of justice, the safety of air navigation and business ethics. She now specialises in international workplace mediation from her practice in Waterloo, Belgium, serving the UN Global Mediation Panel and other international organisations. Avril Sheridan. Hello, Avril. Avril is a former litigation solicitor of 22 years, just to beat your 17, Anna, who has seen the light and is now a full-time mediator, quite right too, with particular expertise in the area of separating couples. With a focus on client-centric solutions, Avril is proud to offer her expertise in navigating complex family dynamics. Her background equips her to guide you through the intricacies of conflict resolution, ensuring a swift and effective path forward. And our guest panelist today is Andre O'Neill. Andre is the founder of Acon Resolutions. She is an accredited MII mediator and holds a master's in mediation and conflict intervention. She has had specialist training in separating couples and child-inclusive mediation. Andre is a certified synergy conflict management coach, and she also just happens to be the MII lead for collaboration with the Irish Red Cross. So that's our panel today. If you could maybe, if you're not one of the panelists, make sure that you're mute. I'm looking at you, Jared. If you could put yourself on mute, then you won't come through the screen. That would be handy. Thank you very much. There we go. Splendid. Anna, we'll come to you first. And just looking at that film from Dylan Marron, I thought very brave chap, nice, funny film and whatever. Well, what were maybe a couple of points that you took from it that you think would be useful?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. Nice to be back with you again on the TED Talk Club. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, I really liked this guy. I really liked Dylan. I hadn't come across him before, and it was really interesting I thought he was very brave, first of all, to stand up and do what he did. So his bravery really came across. But I tried to take a leaf from his book because he set out to try and get to know a little bit more about the people that he was, that were sending him hate mail. So I felt the least I could do was try to get to know a little bit more about him before I started to make up my mind about how I felt. So I actually bought his book, and I listened to it on audio, and I must say I really have very high regard for him after that experience. The title of today's talk, Empathy is Not Endorsement, is actually one of the chapters in his book. And really, I would highly recommend the book to you because it just gave you a glimpse into the kind of lifestyle that he leads and the kind of really the kind of hatred that he has been exposed to. And it was really very, very eye-opening. So I would really recommend that you take a listen to that or take a read of it. But today, just when I was coming online earlier on, I noticed that you can take Dylan's situation in an isolated way, but when I read, there was a message from Antonio Guterres of the United Nations this morning, and he was announcing that today, of all days, the 18th of June, is actually International Day for Counteracting Hate Speech. And today is actually the day where the Director General of the UN, who's in charge of genocide, has actually published a strategy today on how to counteract hate speech. Then that actually catapulted our little TED Talk and Dylan's presentation into a whole different environment for me, because you really see the importance of everybody really doing what they can in order to counteract hate speech wherever we come across it. And that was the key message from Antonio Guterres today, was that it's really everybody's responsibility to do what they can and not to remain silent in the face of, or in the sound of hate speech. So I thought that was a nice little tie-in with what we're discussing to broader scale. So yeah, I like this guy.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Anna. Yeah, I suppose we all have to be allies in this this process. Avril, what about you? What do you take away from this Dylan Marron empathy is not endorsement presentation?
On first hearing it, I kind of thought, oh God, what's this got to do with mediation? And I was kind of coming from it where we, you know, kind of in our opening statement when we're explaining to clients what mediation is, you know, we're inclined to kind of say, oh, we're independent, we don't take sides. You know, our job is to listen to both sides. Whereas we're kind of very conscious of not being tainted by part of the process. Whereas I think he showed very clearly in this, the fact that you may empathize with somebody you disagree with, it doesn't compromise you in any way. So, which is what actually happens during the mediation process. So it kind of distinguished, oh yes, how you feel at the beginning and how you actually operate. So I just kind of brought that to the fore for me, yeah, in that, although that's what I got out of it anyway.
Thank you very much. I suppose the whole point is that we're showing videos that aren't specifically about mediation, but there will
Yes.
be angles, and we will pull those angles out. Andre, this is your first time on the panel on the TED Talk panel. What do you take from Dylan?
I had actually seen the video before, Scott, so it wasn't new to me. So, but I looked at it through a kind of, I suppose, a different set of eyes, you know, because when I'd seen it before, I think actually it could have been somebody, you know, one of my teenagers at the time had shown it to me. And so yeah, I had found it interesting, but actually I suppose listened to it and looked back at it a bit more deeply this time. And I suppose really my key takeaways from it is the importance of us moving, not just as mediators, but as individuals, as in, you know, as a world, moving from monologue to dialogue, to not be afraid from moving from just that self-talk, moving from that talk with people that do agree with us, but actually not being afraid to step inside that space where we have a conversation, where we get curious, where we ask questions, where we bring our own opinions and beliefs and ideas, and we hold them out for everybody to see, but they're still safe. They're still our beliefs and our ideas and our values, but we bring them out for others to see so that they can understand why they're so important to us and maybe develop a sense of respect and understanding. And maybe if there is a shift in somebody's thinking, that we do it in such a way that they're, you know, firmly in their own paradigm, but they can just kind of dip their toe in and see what it's like in another space and actually still feel secure in that, because I think that's really key when we're having conversations and we're opening up dialogue, that it is a vulnerable space. And we have to be mindful of that. And as mediators, I suppose, and as individuals, that when we do get curious and ask questions, that we're bringing people where they're ready to go and where they're able to go. I mean, you look at that conversation with Josh, I mean, that could have opened up a whole different can of worms when the conversation started. But Dylan had the same experience, so they had a commonality. He had a sense of understanding of the pain. And I suppose in mediation, as mediators, sometimes we come across pain that in some way we've experienced, and it doesn't mean it's the same as our pain, but it allows us to go into a space where we can understand it and maybe just create a space for a deeper exploration. And when we go to that deeper exploration, when we get to the bottom of that, that's where we get the connection. And that's where Dylan got to. He got to connection. He got underneath the waterline. He asked a few questions from a place of curiosity and understanding. And then he got to the bottom of it. And at the bottom of that is our place of connection. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we do when we move from the monologue to the dialogue. And I think in the global world that we live in now and the fast movement of people that we're experiencing, that dialogue is going to be key to understanding. Dialogue is going to be key to shifting from the hate speech that Anna was speaking about earlier on, and not to be afraid of the dialogue, and not to be afraid of the challenge or the exploration, but also to do it in a way that creates a sense of safety for us. So yeah, and I think the other thing, final thing I took away from it is we're all than just one story, you know, that we're all than just one thing or one idea or one belief. So yeah, so I loved it. I loved the video.
Very good. I'm going to go to Anna next. I'm just picking up on Andre's point there about moving from monologue to dialogue. You see, that's what I get from these TED Talks. The TED Talks are effectively a monologue, right? We're just watching some guy or woman tell us a story, and we're listening there. But by analysing it, by coming together, we end up trying to figure out what they're trying to do and how that's impacting on different people. It's a really quite interesting thing there. And so what other things might you have picked up that would be particularly useful from a mediator's point of view, if you like, Anna, from Dylan's presentation?
Yeah, when I watched first, I thought it was probably a very good example of how not to mediate. Because I was saying, oh my God, you know, when you compare this really to a mediation, I mean, he talks about dialogue, he talks about conversations, and in his book he talks about like a conversation being a dance, you know, and that he's dancing really with these people. But for me, there were so many. You could almost put it as a training video for mediators, saying, okay, pick out all of the things that are wrong with this from the point of view of mediation. I mean, first of all, and I'm going back to Bob's acronym, the way he talks about VICS, V-I-C-S, that's the easy way to remember it. The first thing for mediation is it has to be voluntary. Well, there wasn't a lot of voluntarism here because he hunted these people down relentlessly, you know, so he went to them rather than them coming to him, as we would traditionally get our mediation cases. The I then is really for impartial, and he just couldn't be impartial because he was the victim. He was the person who was the victim of the hate. The C then is confidential. It was far from confidential because he didn't fill them straight away. You learn from the book that he actually contacted them and got their agreement to really restage this and to have it filmed. So it certainly wasn't confidential. And the only one thing that there was the element of S, which is self-determination. And self-determination was that, okay, they got to decide themselves what the outcome of it was, whether they hated him or whether most of them said, no, we don't hate you. Now that we know you, now that we see you. But you know, I think that Dylan would be a brilliant mediator. And I'm just wondering, does he know about mediation? I was tempted to almost write to him and say, look, have you discovered this brilliant thing called mediation? Because I think you'd be fantastic at it. And I learned from his book as well that his background was there was a Quaker influence in his background, and I thought that was very interesting because Quakers have been very instrumental, I think, in molding a lot of the very good things about mediation. So I feel like calling him up and phoning him up and saying, Dylan, you know, I think you could be a great mediator, or let's rewrite your book from the perspective of mediation. But that's for another TED Talk.
That's the obsession and rabbit holes you go down once you start looking at things on the internet. You have to be careful with all.
Yeah, actually, just one last thing that he did say. Like mediation, we have a clear process, but he actually now looks at the internet as the process, and that's pretty scary. Because if you decide that you're going to come to conflict or conflict resolution through the medium of the internet, we're all in big trouble, because the internet thrives on generating conflict and maintaining conflict. And that's how it really divides, and that's where it draws its power from. I just wanted to add that because I thought it was interesting. Yeah.
Okay. And Avril, what about you? Is there, other than this guy who could be a brilliant mediator, has done everything in mediation wrong, what have you taken from that would be particularly useful for a mediator? Any kind of bits that struck you?
I thought he didn't take up the actual taunts. He didn't show any anger. So he kind of showed, although he you know, he was engaging with people. He accepted that just because they had very different views to him, he showed his humanity or his empathy, which is what we as mediators have to be very conscious of showing when we have somebody in the room who has very different views to what we have. So I thought he was very calm, and he kind of reinforced the calmness and giving recognition. You know, it doesn't change your neutrality. I think that was kind of something that came across to me. And I thought Andrea was good, where she kind of thought it kind of made you kind of ask more questions, which he got more engaged. You know, asking one of the participants, you know, oh, tell me, how are you getting on, or whatever. So he started the same way as we do as part of the process. And I thought Andrea referred to it very well there in hers, and her initial response.
Okay, I'll come to her. Just sticking with you for a second, Alan. He's clearly a very confident chap.
Yeah.
He's confident in himself. Now, most people, I don't know most people, because I don't troll on the internet, but yeah, I really do much on the internet at all. You get me on LinkedIn, folks, that's it. I don't even put my own Facebook posts on, you know what I mean? My wife says, thanks everyone for wishing Scott a happy birthday. So but a lot of people are damaged a lot more than he was. Now, he said he found it difficult, but how much is this confidence, and maybe the role of confidence in mediation might come across? Because he's a stronger guy than most.
Yeah, he's well able to protect himself. Yeah, he is. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Come to you, Andre. What else did you take from that as a mediator? If you're looking at this type of thing, what thing would you say? Well, that strikes me as I've come across that, or that's a really good point. I'm going to steal that.
I think what's interesting is that even though positions can be so polarized and so far apart, that you know, there actually can be a space for connection. There can be a space to actually, even in our difference, there is commonality. And I think sometimes we can miss that in mediation, that when we go in and, you know, two parties might be polar opposites and you go, God, I'm never going to move them. But actually, sometimes it's in their difference that you can bring that piece where they're the same, or where there's, you know, they can recognize the humanness of each other. So I thought that was very interesting. And then also the fact that really he was moving from positions in some way to the interest, you know, so he moved away from the position of you are this and you are that, to actually getting underneath it and saying, you know, you've been hurt in the same way I've been hurt. You were bullied, I was bullied, you know. I think the other thing is showcased as well is how easily things can be stereotyped. Like at the start, when Dylan was talking about the names he was called, and he was called, you know, a gay wad, I think was the term that was used. And if you look at, you know, what a stereotype is, it's when we pick some, you know, some part of somebody's identity and we exaggerate it, and then we turn it into something negative, you know, and then we use that maybe as some sort, or can be used in some way as a weapon. And that's exactly what happened, you know, with Dylan online, that there's parts of what people saw that was used as a weapon. So his own identity was used as a weapon against him. And that can often happen when we're in the mediation room. And, you know, I've heard where somebody would say, you know, somebody is too emotional. And yet that person might see, well, you know, I'm very emotionally aware. I see emotions as my strength, you know, so it's using maybe something that we see as our strength, and somebody else sees it as something they can attack us with. So I think there's so much to learn from that. And I agree with Anna, it would be a great video to use in, you know, training or teaching, even to, you know, you could pick a million different things from that to actually learn from it. So yeah, so I definitely think looking, you know, moving from positions to interest, and also, you know, recognizing that even when the positions are polar opposite, that it's connected in some way, and that there is an opportunity to, even in our differences, find that connection.
Okay, can I come back to you, Anna? Thanks, Andrew. Dylan started off when he's chatting. This is Dylan Marron, if you're just joining us, folks. In his presentation, it's when he was getting trolled by these people that he'd never met before. He started off laughing at their typos and decided it was elitist, and it was unsatisfactory for him. It was making him feel bad being bad. You know, clearly there's some goodness there, but there is a satisfaction in revenge. There's a satisfaction in hitting back, but it's shallow. You maybe want to say a few words about that, because we come across that in mediation where people are falling out over something and they hang on to this, and the first thing they want to do is hit back. So do you want to say anything about that and how interesting that might be in mediation?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, that, Scott. For me, the important thing in mediation is really tuning into the energy that's in the room. And every mediation is unique, because every person is unique and every conflict is unique. And we see also, especially in this video, that hate is very unique. As Andre says, people can pick a stereotype, and they can go for that. They can. So the ability to hate or to express hate is very unique, and usually is very tailored to the person really that you're opposing.
Yeah.
So for me as a mediator, you're getting a sense before you come into the mediation, first of all, of what the dispute is about. And in your one-to-one engagements, when conversations with the people in the pre-mediation, you're getting a sense of their energy, like you're tuning into the energy of one person, like, and you're holding that vibration. So you know what they're tuned into. Separately, you're tuning into the vibration of the other person, and you know the frequency that they're on. But the surprises often come when you get the two people in the same room, because then the third channel opens up, which is really the interaction between them, and the whole thing can go off the rails at that stage. That's where another vibration has really opened up, and the energy can go from, perhaps even you hope it might be mildly positive. It can really turn very negative and very toxic very quickly within a mediation. But that's where I think that's where a mediator can really come into their own power. And, by actually tuning into the energy of what's going on. And even if the words are a desire for revenge, to focus on your question, to really get down what's behind that desire for revenge. What is it that makes the person even express that desire for revenge? Or they may not even articulate it, but just by the way they're behaving, that they are, they're acting something out within the mediation, and they're not prepared to acknowledge perhaps that there was hurt. They're not prepared to acknowledge anything. So this is all actually played out, sometimes with words, sometimes without words, sometimes with gestures, sometimes with looks, sometimes with just non-verbal behavior. And this is really the challenge for the mediator, to be able to tap into that energy, tune into it, open up, keep opening up that neutral, impartial, non-judgmental vibration that opens up pathways to enable people to broaden their perspective. And looking forward to Belfast, to the conference, broadening the perspective is so important in mediation, so that you're giving people somewhere to go out of their narrow confines of revenge and hatred, and to move into, a broader perspective, and move into another dimension. That's really the magic of mediation, I think. It's a challenge for the mediator.
The challenge is also a privilege, yeah. But Avril.
It is, yeah.
Avril, maybe coming to you, following on from that, the curiosity, we've heard that word quite a lot in this. And Dylan Marron, he was curious enough to contact people whom he'd never heard, never seen, and people who I'd probably never heard of him, but I found him on the internet and started insulting him. And in order to get a connection, he had to make them curious, which is what mediators do. If somebody's in a corner, right, haha, I've just caught you, you've been trolling people, you've been calling people bad names, right, the immediate response normally is to hit back and try and justify why you've done a horrible thing. But he had to engage to change them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have changed at all. So you want to say something about that and the importance of moving people, following on from Anna's points.
Anna's point was good in that, you know, he was dealing with the initial reaction, which was absolute hate, is what he was facing, name calling and hate. So the only way he could try and move from that, and I think he needed himself to understand it. And I think that was a driver for him. He needed to understand why they hated him so much. Why did somebody who had different views to him, who was reared differently to him, have such anger? So he had to kind of try and connect with the anger and move from the hate to what was driving these people. And I think he was very brave to engage, because when you are in a mediation, you're dealing with, you know, high levels of toxic behavior. You don't know where that anger phase or where it's going to bring you to. You don't know what it is, but it's the only way that you can actually start moving from positions of hatred, because that's where sometimes they start, to, you know, interest. So, you know, I agree with both of them. I think, you know, they both highlighted it really well.
Okay, Andre, come back to you, just again, following on from what Avril's saying there. I suppose it's the importance of hearing the other side's perspective. Now, the other side's perspective might be that we had a born-again Christian calling him all these horrible names, and him being, you know, urban, gay, confident, whatever. Totally different perspectives and upbringings, but unless we get these people together, it's not going to change. So in mediation, we need to do that too. People are coming from two sides of the argument, two sides of the coin. You want to chat about that, Andre?
Yeah, I think really what we're, you know, when we're in a mediation, or even generally when we, you know, are confronted with people who have very strong views or opinions, I mean, it's trying to understand, you know, what's brought them to think that way. There's I can't think of the name of the book. It's by Bob Proctor. It was wrote many years ago, you know, and he talks about paradigms, and paradigms being your coding, and you know what brings about your coding or your way of thinking, and it's you know it's the experience. It's the values that's passed on. He even goes as far as saying that some of it's in your DNA. You know, some of it is stuff that you inherit, and that can be the basis for why you believe or why you value certain things. Okay, so I think when we are in a mediation room or we're having a conversation with somebody, that's what we need to understand first. What have they experienced to bring them maybe to that value, to that belief? What is it about their experience that makes them think that way? And I mean, obviously, that wouldn't be something we'd be bringing into a joint session for the first time, because all hell could break loose, you know, using the HE double hockey stick phrase that was used in the video. But, you know, to actually gently go there in the individual session. I mean, we all know that most of the work, or a huge amount of the work that we do, is done in those individual sessions before we ever go into a joint session. And sometimes it might be just about planting a seed that, you know, causes them to question maybe their paradigm, or that something might be different, or somebody might have a different paradigm, or that actually, okay, that's where my thinking comes from. That's why I believe that. Oh, so maybe that other person, maybe something that they've experienced in life causes them to bring that. So we're all the time just maybe testing assumptions, maybe challenge is too strong of a word. Maybe what we're doing is we're exploring them. And we would always do that first, obviously, before we ever go into a joint session. And if the space allows for it, having met with both parties, and it feels like the right thing to bring into that joint session that's going to help them move along and maybe to develop an understanding. I mean, I think what Dylan said was around empathy doesn't, what was the phrase he used?
Empathy is not an endorsement. Yeah.
Empathy is not an
Yeah.
endorsement. So actually, there's actually a piece by, I found this quote for you. Dialogue is to be able to talk while suspending your opinions, holding them in front of you by neither suppressing them nor insisting upon them, not trying to convince, but simply to understand. And that's by a guy called David Bohm. He's a physicist. Now, I know nothing about physics other than I have a brother who's a physicist. So it's just something I came across. But I think it's a really interesting piece. We're not trying to convince, but simply to understand. And I think as a mediator, we're not trying to push people to agree with the other person, but just to simply understand.
Yeah, and it's a phrase I'm sure all of us as mediators use. You know, when you bring them in for the storytelling piece, and you've managed expectations beforehand. You know, try and listen to understand. Don't get ready to reply, because it's what I suppose we're set up. We're set up to do. And it's again, maybe come back to you, Anne. I mean, you've got people coming from different backgrounds trying to understand. And maybe if I'd been brought up like some of the guys that were trolling Dylan, then I might have been brought up as a fundamentalist Christian who believes that homosexuality is a sin. And I don't know, might be encouraged to do certain things. You know what I mean? It's trying to understand where that comes from, but you're not going to change that mindset unless you listen and try and get behind it, you know. So any thoughts on that kind of?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear Andrea and Avril's thoughts on this, and I think we're each speaking probably from our own experience. Just thanks to Niamh, I see Niamh put up if Fitzpatrick has put up the reference to the book there that Andrea was talking about the paradigms. So thanks to Niamh for that. So I think this discussion shows that we all come to this from our own paradigm, or really from our own perspective. And I think for me, one of the most important things is when you encounter a situation like that, first of all, you have to protect yourself, you know, and you also have to make sure that you don't get this, as Jerry O'Sullivan calls it, the amygdala hijack.
Yeah.
You know, that you don't suddenly discover that you've become part of the row, or you know, that your amygdala has been hijacked, and suddenly you can't think rationally, and you're actually so caught up in the fight or in the debate that you're actually maybe defending yourself. So you really do have to work very hard to be very confident in your own paradigm, and to be able to navigate your own space and keep yourself safe. Because when you encounter hatred, very often, instead of actually taking the hatred upon yourself, it can be helpful if you actually see it as a mask. Why is this person hating like this? What kind of a mask are they wearing? And to try and get behind the mask. And I say that because I had an interesting experience once. I'd started a new job, and at the end of the first week, I thought I was doing great, but everybody had gone home for the evening. But this person came, knocked on my door, and said, "Oh, I hear you're the new person, and welcome," and all the rest of it. And then they said to me, "I just want to let you know that I will hate you as long as you're working in this organization, and I will make your life hell." So they said to me, nothing personal, but I just want you to know that. I thought,
It's Liam Neeson or something. No?
I mean, what do you do when somebody says something like that? And I wasn't a mediator at the time, but I remember saying to them, "I don't even know who you are. And how can you say something like that to me?" And the answer the person made me was, "No, I don't know you, and I hear you're a very nice person, but I will hate you because I hate the person that you're working for. And the fact now that you're working for them makes you a legitimate target in my view." So, you know, you can be dealing with kind of hatred. There's a craziness to hatred, you know, but for this person, there was a logic. The fact that the target of this person's hate, which had gone on for years, apparently. The fact now that I was in the hierarchical chain of command and working closely to this person, I then became a legitimate target because they felt that if they could destroy me, this would be one up for them against the person that was the long-term source of their hatred. So I think there's this illogic, there's an illogic madness to hatred, but underneath it, there's also a kind of a justification or a kind of a logic for the person who's in the act of hating. And as mediators, that's what we have to get into. We have to get into the understanding. We have to get under the radar of what it is that makes them say that or feel that, so that so that you can actually navigate from their perspective or from their paradigm. I think that's really the challenge to us as mediators.
Yeah, I suppose there's always many steps to go
Yeah.
behind. They didn't hate you
Yeah.
because you just come in the office. They didn't even hate you because they worked for that person. They hated you because
Yeah.
of something else that person had done, and it's
Exactly.
something that it probably impacted on their paradigm. Going back to the book that
Exactly.
they posted
Yes.
up there, back in their youth, back in the way they were brought up. This goes back to fundamentalist things. Hate's a very strong word, Anna, I think, in this process. But it's certainly, I've had mediations where people have used the word and it's come across quite strongly.
It can be hereditary. I don't know, is it Erbil or Andre said it can be hereditary. It can be something that's passed on from generations, and almost that there's an expectation that you will hate a certain group of people, and if you deviate from that, then perhaps you can find yourself on the being ostracized by your group, by your family, or whatever. So this is really about broadening the parameters, and I think in Ireland we have a lot of very good experience of that as well. But I think in Ireland we can also show all the steps that have been taken down through the years to try and create a new dimension, a new paradigm, a new idealist and more idealistic space that people can shift into and move into over time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something very often that happens in a flash. It's something that can be very slowly, putting down step by step a way of building trust and actually influencing and changing behaviors for the better.
Okay.
So that's something we know a lot about, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Avril, just coming to you, there was another point I picked up here. I'm just looking at it there about the Dylan Marron made about not shutting down opposing viewpoints, because at first, he was blocking them. He goes, it's only supported by your supporters. So the people that like you for taking these actions, for it's only people that think like you. You're not going to change anything by automatically blocking. Any comments on that? Because you've seen that in mediations.
Yeah, no, you do come across that in mediations, and if somebody's belief, if it's kind of like a belief or a religion, or made, as Anna said, it's almost passed down in the DNA, but like somebody with a Christian fundamentalist or whatever, sometimes you cannot break because they're so driven by the actual, beliefs that nothing will actually shift them.
Yeah.
And they cannot be shifted. So I think we have to be able to recognize that in some instances, but it's obviously in very extreme cases, I think. I think a lot of, say, Dylan's ones, a lot of his ones were kind of people taking pot shots for the sake of taking pot shots, rather than people being really having a huge conviction about what they were saying. They were just writing it because they were angry, rather than having a conviction about a particular belief. That's what I thought anyway. And, we have to kind of be able to differentiate the two, I think, in the mediation process.
Okay. Andre, I don't know if you were going to come in there, Andre, but one of the things about this is it's on the internet. It's easy to like something. It's easy to dislike something, stick up emojis, make a comment, and it comes back and haunts people because they end up getting sacked or they're not allowed to stand as candidates for political parties because 10 years ago they liked some comment by some inappropriate person or party. And what about that? What about I suppose the ease and anonymity and, doing it 2 or 3 stages away, whereas we've got poor Anna there being attacked by a colleague that she didn't know in person, saying, I'm going to hate you because you work with them. Any other comments? And then we'll come to just summing up.
Yeah, I think really, I suppose if in the case like Anna, you're given the opportunity, or you have the opportunity, you can take it if you want to take it and actually ask questions and explore it. And that's what Anna did, you know. But when it's that 2 or 3 times removed, you know, if we're receiving it as if we're in that space that Anna was, well, it's very difficult to deal with because we're actually removed from it. So we're being impacted in the same way as if it's one-on-one, but in another way, we're removed by a number of different degrees. So actually, we don't get the opportunity to respond to it. We don't get the opportunity to explore it. We don't get the opportunity to reflect on it. So we're left holding that ourselves. So a bit like, you know, one of the things that I do is conflict coaching, and sometimes conflict coaching is about when the person can't have the conversation with somebody that they're, you know, that has hurt them, or they feel that they've been impacted in a negative way, or maybe somebody that they've hurt, and actually they don't have the opportunity to have that conversation. So in some way you're dealing with them on a one-to-one basis in order to help them through that. And a bit like that, when we're that far removed from it, we're left with that, we're left holding that. And I suppose that can go 2 ways. It can either go internally and cause, you know, I suppose, damage to us as a person, as an individual, our sense of identity, or it's something that we can take out, we can look at, we can reflect on, and actually make peace with some of it and say, actually, I'm okay with that. And I'm fine. And actually, you know, test your assumption of the person and say, actually, that's probably where they're coming from. And there's not much I can do about that, but I can be happy with what I'm doing here. And I can be happy with my decisions on this. So I suppose, even though it's different to mediation, you know, it's that conflict coaching gives that opportunity to actually look at those things, you know, with a coach, where maybe you mightn't necessarily be able to do it on a one-to-one basis. So it is very difficult when it's removed and we can't do that. And it's important to actually, you know, work through that through reflective practice or with somebody, or else it will kind of go internally, you know, maybe in a negative way.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone in the panel. I see some nice thoughts coming in as people are disappearing. And yeah, let's not beat ourselves up too much. Some problems are quite intractable and take more than one session or a couple of pre-sessions and a joint session to get a resolution. So Alison, I think you've got a final slide, do you, for us? Just the conferences in Belfast this year. I'm looking here. We've got the 16th of July, Tuesday 16th. There we go, 1 o'clock. And we're going to be looking at that one there. Betsy Kaufman, 4 tips to kickstart honest conversations at work. Well, there you go. It's almost like a continuation. The panel will be back. Why is it so hard to speak up and productively disagree at work? Leadership and organization coach Betsy Kaufman shows how to bring the candid conversations that usually happen at the water cooler out into the open with 4 practical strategies you can implement right now to have honest, transparent discussions with your colleagues. Well, that looks exciting. So hopefully that's going to be brilliant. And just let you know, on the top of that slide, you can see there, bookings are now open. We've kept the price the same as last year, 175. I think it's the early bird for full members of the MII. If you're not a member, it's €200 at the moment on the early bird price. It's on the 18th, 19th October, and there will be a lot of other things on and around that time that we're doing, almost like a mediation week. So there's a number of things coming up for you if you want to keep an eye on the MII updates. So thank you very much to our panel, Andre. Thank you very much, Andre O'Neill, to Anna Doyle, and to Avril Sheridan and Alison back in the office of the MII, and to everybody else on screen. Thank you, and hopefully we'll see you in July.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. You take care now.
Summer.